Welcome to this Conversations on Groong episode. Today we're talking about the aftermath of the 2024 parliamentary elections in Georgia with Dr. Archil Sikharulidze. To our listeners, thank you. We really appreciate your comments and thoughts on our YouTube videos. So please stay involved, like our shows, share them with your friends, because that will help us gain a little more visibility on the platform. And of course, we would always love it if you would also support us. Go to podcasts.groong.org/donate and sign up. All right, on with the show.
Welcome back, Archil, and great to have you with us again.
Welcome, Archil.
Thank you, Hovik. Thank you, Asbed. I'm really happy that we meet on a regular basis. So it was last time, it was like a few months ago before the elections. So I'm really happy to be here.
Well, we have a lot to learn from you. We're anxiously watching what's going on in Georgia. So for our listeners, to recap, on October 26, Georgia held parliamentary elections, and Georgian Dream won a 54% majority, while the combined opposition parties and alliances that cleared the 5% vote margin to get into parliament got 37%. And the international reactions were predictable. The West has rallied behind Georgian President Salome Zurabishvili and called the results fraudulent. Everybody else saw the results as an expression of Georgia's desire to steer clear of the Russia-West global firestorm raging in Ukraine and now in Syria and everywhere else. And a month after that, so fast forward a month, as Zurabishvili's term as president comes to an end in mid-December, she is demanding the annulment of the election results and inciting Western-funded opposition rallies in Tbilisi, which in the past few days are bordering on violence. Most opposition forces have announced that they will renounce their mandates, but one opposition party, I believe, Gaharia's Strong Georgia, however, has not joined the boycott. Archil, is there a constitutional crisis in Georgia?
Well, thank you once again for inviting me. You should understand that when you speak about Georgia, unfortunately, Georgian scholars, experts, they are not independent. They are usually following some party on the ideology. Contrary, I will tell you the truth. I was voting for position for 36 number, like Girchi. It unfortunately didn't manage to enter the parliament building, but as Girchi, I do recognize the Georgian Dream got majority of votes. In the place where I'm living now, they had absolute dominance. And the crisis in practice means inability of the government to manage institutions. And among the most important institutions, there is a Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and the Ministry of Internal Affairs and Ministry of Security or Defense. Currently, Georgian Dream holds a total grip on these institutions. Since Mikhail Saakashvili government, and we should thank him for this, there is no government that cannot manage the country. So when we speak about the protests and the meetings and the crisis, it usually happens from 7 p.m. to 2 a.m. And if it is violent, what was happening last 2 days, it is usually till 5 a.m. After this and before this, there is no crisis. I mean, no protests. In majority of cities, we cannot say the situation is not controlled. The protest itself is usually, we should understand that there is those people who protest because they believe. There are people who protest because they disagree with the government on some issues, and there are fanatics. I should unfortunately say this, but in Georgia, among Georgian society, there is I would say, radical minor group of pro-European radicals that are driving country to the protest. So, I mean, for example, yesterday I had my friends, very close people to me, attending the protest. They were very, very peaceful, no aggression, and they were pretty surprised when the post officers started dismantling the protest. And only after they came, they watched TV and realized that there were from 100 to 500 people intentionally attacking Parliament building and police officers. So there is a very small number of protesters intentionally provoking unrests And once the unrest starts and police officers react, they disappear and they hope that this police response will provoke further aggression. So this is unfortunately the general approach, because we have seen this in every country. When we protest, majority never agrees to for the violence. So you need to provoke them. And I do support the idea of separating people who are provoking the fight and those who are attending the protest. Once again, I have so many acquaintances, friends attend the protests. I personally do not attend the protest because I don't understand what they do, what they protest. I voted for opposition for 36 number Gürçi, but I precisely understand that I lost. There is no sense of, from democratic standpoint, there is no sense of protesting. If you protest against decision of Georgian Dream to not to rise unilaterally, demand for opening talks with EU on EU integration, and to refuse get money from EU to implement reforms that are necessary to be the part of the EU, then once again, Paweł Herczynski and all EU officials have stated that neither Georgia nor other countries can become member of any EU integration until 2030. So it's like 6 years prior to this date. What is the point of protesting? I'm not sure. And in generally, as I said before we started recording, unfortunately today we are not about the rational, we are about emotions. And it's about confrontation between the government that holds total grip on institutions against pretty small number of radically motivated people. All other protesters are very peaceful. And I should also note that, unfortunately, yesterday we saw the huge violence on the streets. On the one hand, small number of protesters attacking and hitting and trying to invade to Georgian Parliament building is absolutely unconstitutional. On the other hand, we have seen, unfortunately, some police officers and special task forces that were too motivated to beat up protesters. So by the end of the day, it's unfortunate to see that in Georgia, it's all about emotions again, not the rational thinking.
Maybe this was old footage, but am I correct in seeing that there were actually members of EU Parliament or EU politicians also attending and leading the protests?
No, EU Parliament members, as well as opposition members, civil society representatives, these people usually provoke protests, but they never attend the final scenario. I mean, I have never seen in my life since 2003 when I started attending protests, any officials, any leaders to attend the riots. So usually what it happens, for example, like Salome Zorobishvili, who attended the protest for a few minutes, calling different standpoint pro-Russian, calling those who do not agree with her to be pro-Russian. She just reached to special task force members. She asked them whether they serve Russia or Georgia, and then she immediately left. At 2 a.m., there was a huge fight between special task forces, and from 200 to 300 people then ended up protesters being arrested. So usually neither EU Parliament members nor opposition leaders and even Salome Zorobishvili or civil society representatives who are calling, and this is not a secret anymore. Let's read what President Salome Zorobishvili said: for a revolutionary scenario, for military and police to attack the government and those who support the government and overthrow the government for the sake of they call European values. So it's unfortunate to see, like previously, that political leaders make statements, provoke unrest, and then they hide simply, waiting for the result to be seen.
Now, going back to the mandates, we had a bunch of opposition parties renounce their mandates, put them down, or claim that they will not accept them. But according to the Georgian constitution, is there still sufficient quorum in terms of mandates for the parliament to function?
Well, first of all, I think that it's irrelevant anymore for a few next days because opposition leaders stated and called for youngsters. I emphasize youngsters from 15 to 25 years old to invade parliament to overthrow this regime, and they are hidden for now. They are waiting whether this revolutionary scenario and this violent confrontation between special task forces and some protesters end up. Before that, no settlements were made, nothing simply. If they see that this scenario is over, and I do assume, based on what I am seeing now, if no additional variables will pop up, that the government holds a strong grip on institutions, it will be able to finalize this process, whether violently or not, but they will be finished. In this case, according to our constitution, the opposition can write official letters to Georgian parliament and ask the members to be stripped of the parliament member mandate. For now, they officially ask the list of the secondary members to be taken out. So what they did, they have elected members, the main list of the opposition party's members, and the secondary list. For now, they ask to annihilate the secondary list. So if the main followers disagree and decide not to enter the parliament, so others cannot join it. But for now, as far as I know, only Georgi Vashadze, one of the leaders of the number 4 unity, asked personally to be stripped of the mandate. The rest are just simply waiting. Once again, what I'm seeing now is that some part of Georgian society, let's be fair about this. Maybe majority dislike Georgian dream in some aspects, but I don't see majority supporting violence. So what we see is that some part of Georgian society attending the protests, and in this some part of Georgian society, pretty minor group attacking the parliament. This is very important to emphasize. Because once again, yesterday, I met my friends and colleagues who attended the protest, who were extremely peaceful. They did nothing, and they were surprised that those who were in front of the parliament, where a small mob was trying to invade the parliament building. And only once they came home, they were managed to watch the TV and see what was happening. So opposition is just simply waiting now. If they see that this mob fails, and yesterday, let's be clear, it was a huge fight between the majority of special task forces and minority of violent mobs, and those who unfortunately were encircled in this fight. As the result of this fight, I would say that probably 20, 30, 40 people were really, really injured. And this is the hope of the local opposition, because their argument that these elections were stolen is irrelevant. From what I'm watching and listening now, they do not argue about falsification anymore. Even OSCE stated that there were no mass fabrication. This is false claim. The only claim they have now is that the nature of elections is to be hidden, and because the markers used there help the government arguably to see what people, for whom people voted. These elections are not constitutional because people were not safe in their decision. This is very extremely questionable, because if during any elections I just turn on my paper and show you who I voted for, it means that we can cancel election again. Second statement is that the Georgian dream is arguably pro-Russian, but this is narrative for the last 12 years. And because of this, we should overthrow the government. And the third one is that because the government is pro-Russian, it is also violent, and we should overthrow this. So what I see now is the Salome Zurabishvili opposition realize that they have very low personal support. So they provoke protests, they hide and wait the result and consequences of the fight. If fight is successful, more people attend the protests, they try to use this protest for political points. If the protest is over, and I think that by the end of the day, from Mikhail Saakashvili time, the government holds all powers, enough powers to smash the protesters, then they will probably start talking about maybe canceling the mandate. But once again, if the government managed to suppress the protests, then there is no sense of giving up the protests. The EU, the US are watching and waiting for the final results. If Georgian Dream wins, I don't think that EU or the US, especially Donald Trump, will start, debating the result. They will just simply go ahead with the government that they have.
By saying Georgian Dream wins, you mean winning on the streets, meaning that the opposition fails to do like a street coup. Is that correct?
I don't think that opposition is. I mean, the problem here is that opposition saying that I'm not on the street. No, it's not me. These are the youngsters, Generation Z, scholars, professors, and they're trying to involve all the universities to use everyone who is accessible to say it's not up to us. It is people trying to overthrow the government, and it's very interesting because it always reminds me of the Soviet Union and the book that was really well written when they were analyzing why Joseph Stalin decided to use the Russian nationalism during Soviet Union time. That was a really good statement. Once Joseph Stalin realized that this proletariat idea was not enough to motivate people to fight, they decided to use this already cancelled concept of the nationalism because it is the only stuff that could have provoked like Georgians, Russians, Ukrainians to wage a war. The same is happening here. So what we are saying is that they came, they provoke, they say, then they hide, and they say it's not us. It is Georgian people. And what really makes me a bit frustrated is because there's really part of Georgian society who think that these people who are, well equipped, have like hammers, like tents, like Molotov cocktails, and money to do all of this, that they are some guys from the street. Once again, I remember I was lecturing students at Free State University at some point during the year of Maidan, and I just asked one question: do you really believe this guy equipped in $1,000 stuff, he just decided to spend so much money on the protest? Once again, it is unfortunate to see that there are people who really believe that someone can spend $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 on equipping himself or herself for the sake of democracy. Once again, as a political scientist, I do respect everyone who disagrees with Georgian dream, but to be naive nowadays, I think it's you cannot call yourself educated if you are naive.
With all due respect, Archil, we have a record of various different color revolutions around the world, and as one of our guests on this podcast, Pascal Lota, said basically the West has mastered the art of regime change without any direct violence itself. So we have been watching the situation in Armenia since 2018, and your amazement, I would say, maybe at least it's for me, I personally feel 10 times amazement that the government in Armenia is still in power. But that's my subjective opinion. But let's assume that the situation on the street does not evolve to regime change or that it is calmed down. The plenary session of the parliament to decide on the presidential election was held without a decree from Zurabishvili, who repeated her claims that the election results were invalid. She has a ceremonial role, but at least she needs to give a decree for the plenary session to be held, and she didn't give that decree. But that session was held nevertheless during the last week. And during this first session, the Georgian Dream Party in the new parliament nominated Mikhail Kavelashvili as the candidate for president and set a date for the upcoming presidential election to December 14. But Zurabishvili circles obviously insist that such elections would be illegal until the Georgian Constitutional Court rules on her post-election challenges. And in fact, I believe just today she said that she will not leave her office because the elections are invalid, despite the results. What can you tell us about Kavelashvili's nomination, and how can Zurabishvili hold up the election of the president?
I mean, she cannot. Let's be clear about this for your audience, especially for the English-speaking audience on Twitter or X that usually watches like mainstream media, and that, to be fair with you, is irrelevant for most of the Georgians. I mean, when I watch like Twitter, like Deutsche Welle, BBC, I'm just wondering where do these people live in general? Because I mean, I do live in the working center of Tbilisi. So every time they make some stories, I'm just wondering whether I'm living in Tbilisi or they are living in Tbilisi in general. But so let's solve this puzzle. So Solomon Zurabishvili came to power in 2018. She was called by the same people who are now calling her pro-Western as a pro-Russian agent of Vladimir Putin. They intentionally, verbally, and physically insulted Solomon Zurabishvili till 2022. They stalked her in various pubs and restaurants and were trying to attack her as a Russian agent. So just to make clear, the same people who are now calling her the defender of democracy and the EU in the EU were calling her a Russian agent and were demanding her to be executed. I'm not joking. Like, you can check the video footages. Furthermore, she was elected thanks to the support of Georgian Dream. She didn't manage to win the first stage of elections. She won the second stage, and I will remind you that during the second stage of elections, banners with her faces were totally removed, and there was Bidina Ivanishvili and Georgian members calling to vote for her. This is not perception, these are facts. Till 2022, she was pretty silent. She was called agent of Russia. Opposition leaders demanded for her execution, to drink her blood, in quotes. But since the war in Ukraine started, she started slowly drifting away from Georgian Dream. As soon as she saw that the narrative in EU and the West have changed, and those people who observe and in the control the Georgian and South Caucasian bloc decided that Georgia needs to be more anti-Russian, she decided to move on with those people. Since that, we have seen the dramatic shift in narrative. Those opposition leaders who called her Russian agent now are calling her the only legitimate president and only legitimate power in Georgia. I will remind you that these people for 4 years had not recognized her as a legitimate power, just to make sure that it's not about democracy, colleagues. It's not about the freedom. It's all about the power allocation. So nowadays, Solomon Zurabishvili, as a politician, her political rating is maybe 1, maybe 2, maximum 3%. She is more like a face because Georgian Dream opted for her to show their devotion to radical European way. What I call radical European way, let me just explain. So my colleagues, Georgian scholars, wrote a really nice article about Europeanness in Georgia, saying that the Georgian people are for the Europeanness, for European identity, and that they consider European foreign policy as a part of their ideology. I then wrote a scholar article saying that nowadays these Europeans turn to radical Europeans, where the same people say and speak on behalf of democracy and freedom, but in the same time, they are calling others to restrict rights and freedom for other people, because they say that those who do not agree with me must be cancelled. That is what I call radical Europeans. So we have no right to have different standpoint. We should follow the European narrative, or we must be cancelled. This neo-communist historical determinism, you are either with us, you are pro-Russian. Now, Mikhail Kavalashvili, what is he? Not who is he, but what is he? He is a classical, whether you like it or not, Georgian. Family guy, huge family, children, white man, white Caucasian, Orthodox Christian, and plus the man who used to work in EU, in Russia, and for whom European foreign policy is not a new religious doctrine. For him, it is a tool for better living standards, and who is generally devoted to this standpoint that is Georgian Dream is preaching. What is Georgian Dream preaching? Georgian Dream never wanted to engage to a fight with the EU. Georgian Dream was saying that, well, till 2022, we were for balance, for keeping safety and peace in Georgia. And EU and US were pretty okay with that. But then the geopolitical shift happened, and Kavalashvili is a representation of this. It's a clear message for the West and for the internal majority and conservative majority that we are no more focused on European legitimacy. We don't need Europeans and Americans to tell us that you are the government. No, we will rely on conservative majority, which is traditional, family-oriented, Christian orthodoxy-oriented, and this is Mikhail Kavalashvili. He will not rise against the Georgian Dream because he shared these views, and he will not rise because for him, Georgia, whether bad or not, I call like modern Georgian democracy. I do believe that we have democracy in Georgia. I call it irregular democracy, having like drawing parallels with Lincoln Mitchell's very prominent book, Uncertain Democracy. Kavalashvili is all about saying that, look, we have majority conservative support. We don't need EU and the USA. So we will take care of majority of this majority of conservative support. And it's up to you whether to go with us or do not go. And Salome Zurabishvili is totally opposite. And one more, Georgian Dream initiated, if I'm not mistaken, 2018, the constitutional amendments where they wrote in the introduction that all Georgian institutions must serve the grand goal, EU and NATO integration. I remember I was one of the highest critics of this approach because there is no EU and NATO member state that has the same statement in the constitution, because constitution is the statement by the people and for the people. It cannot be about the membership. But this was done, like Salome Zurabishvili pointed as a president, to show off, to say that we are with the radical European approach. Now the Georgian Dream is harvesting these mistakes, and on the one hand, fighting those who said that you wrote in the constitution, so we have constitutional rights. And on the other hand, to fight the president that they have directly appointed. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this is the precise example how you make grand mistakes. That's from my standpoint.
Archil, you do not think that there will be a real problem, constitutionally speaking, to accept the plenary session's results of setting December 14 as a date of election?
I think that it's now decided it's not about the law anymore, Asbed. US ambassador is silent. I met her personally. She was supporting the opposition. It's not a secret. Like all EU, except maybe Bulgaria, Slovakia, and some Italia, all others were directly involved, supporting opposition. EU ambassador is pretty silent. She just made a few comments 1 month since the elections. She generally expressed her dissatisfaction with the decision not to initiate unilaterally the calls for EU integration, but that's all. And I think that it's obvious that because Donald Trump is coming and everyone feels that the US position is very ambivalent. But on the other hand, victorious Ursula von der Leyen is pressing pretty hard. And that is why German ambassador, EU Ambassador Paul Herczynski are delicate but pretty obvious that they would like to see totally different the government, not because of democracy, to be clear, because of geopolitics stance. So it's not about law, constitution. It's about who holds enough power to push the topic. From what I've seen last 2 days, the government has all tools to not only dismantle the protests, but to actually have a punishment process in Georgia.
So the situation remains fluid, obviously, as you are discussing. And just this Thursday, as a follow-up to all of these events, Georgian Dream suspended EU membership talks for the coming 4 years, accusing the EU of using the discussions as a blackmail. And just as we are recording right now, the US has decided to suspend its strategic partnership with Georgia, saying, quote, "We condemn the use of excessive force against Georgians who were protesting treason against the Constitution. The EU is a bulwark against the Kremlin. Because of this, we stopped the strategic partnership with Georgia," unquote. What do you make of this escalation at this point in time?
Well, this is decision by the administration of Joseph Biden, who let ATMS to be used against Russia and Ukraine. This is attempt of Joseph Biden's administration to, let's be clear, not to overthrow the government in Georgia. I mean, I never thought that I would say this about US government and the EU in general, but this is a direct message for those who are willing to use power against the government that we do not mind. This is just a direct message. But on the other hand, what matters is not what protesters can to rely on the theories of revolutions, regime change. It's all about the security apparatus that can confront. So whether the US ambassador says anything or not, it doesn't depend on the US embassy, to be fair with you. If you were in the middle of, I don't know, like Cuba or maybe Mexico, maybe like Ukraine, you could have seen some, I don't know, unknown people from Russia or from another country involved in this protest. But for now, as for what I see, it's like internal confrontation between aggressive attitudes of some part of Georgian society against majority, because once again, it is 1 month since elections. I have not seen any serious arguments against the result of the elections. In the week, make a comparative analysis. Let's make comparative analysis between Moldova and Georgia. I mean, we need just to read OSCE report where it's obvious that Georgia is superior even in these issues. Now, to remind you, it was 2 days ago, the head of this mission, Finnish European Parliament member, stated that Georgia held competitive elections where opposition could have offered diversity of ideas and thoughts. Once again, what is happening in Georgia now has nothing to do with democracy, law, and constitution.
Archil, you mentioned Trump a moment ago. Do you think all these developments that we are discussing register on the incoming US president's radar at all? What do you think his policy is going to be towards Georgia and the South Caucasus in general?
Well, I mean, I don't think that I need to guess. Let's make like comparison. Donald Trump was president of US and ambassador of Georgia was Kelly Degnan. For those who are tracking down objectively, once again, because being independent, being objective are two different stuff. People say that I'm independent. It doesn't mean that you're objective. So, and we all remember when Donald Trump was in office, Kelly Degnan was pretty okay with Georgian Dream policy. Furthermore, one of the leaders of opposition, Nika Gwaramia, in online during the TV stream was calling her a contributor to Georgian Dream's pro-Russian policy. This is a quote. You can check it down just online. As soon as Donald Trump left the office, she became highly critical to Georgian Dream. As soon as Joseph Biden came, she was fully on the side of opposition. So, based on these assumptions, I can make some conclusion that Donald Trump and his administration will not be such rigorous in trying to make Georgian political establishment and the government anti-Russian. I think that there will be no demands from Georgia to sacrifice for EU and US solidarity because Trump's main goal is to finalize the wars. This is his main message. While for Joseph Biden and for those who followed him, message was to bring strategic defeat to Russia by all costs. Let's make clear. And this cost must be paid by Russians, Ukrainians, but not by EU and US citizens. This is obvious. For Trump, I think that once he comes to office, and this is what we see actually, why the Robert Dunnigan was so silent, because she knows that the approach will be different. These statements, very short one, very catchy. These are just how to say some slogans, just to show that we are here, we are silent, but we are not going to make any other noise. And this is why I do assume that there is a serious attempt to make a dramatic shifts in Georgia, like in Ukraine, with allowing Ukraine to use ATMS, that by default makes it much more complicated to negotiate peace. And one more thing I should say about Trump. Let's not be naive. Georgian Dream is using China to counter Joseph Biden's and EU's bureaucracy. So they agreed to build the deep harbor in Anaklia using Chinese investments. And this is a serious problem because during Donald Trump's government, Mike Pompeo, the head of State Department, came to Tbilisi and officially, indirectly sent a message and said that we had not spent billions of dollars in Georgia to let Russian or Chinese dominate in your economy.
You took the words out of my mouth because I was going to ask you this question. So we know that Trump favors less intervention, less regime change, or at least that's the common knowledge. But we also know that China is the #1 enemy for the Trump administration. So what will happen with the Anaklia port? If China is the #1 enemy, then does this mean that Trump will accept any result in Georgia that gets rid of the Chinese? How do you see this?
Well, Hovik, my Russian colleague, it's now unpopular to say that you have Russian colleagues, but I still have them. Russian colleague said, really nice stuff. He said, it's not Georgian Dream that turned back on the West. It's modern Western nomenclature trying to turn back on current Georgia. So Georgian Dream is was pushing policy till the beginning of the war in Ukraine that was cherished by US and by the same EU. So it was actually the new geopolitical standpoint of the US, led by Joseph Biden and by Charles Michel and Ursula von der Leyen there, that pushed Georgia to diversify. I mean, I don't think the Georgian Dream members actually are keen to fight with EU. No, if you ask me, they are really happy to negotiate, to go to Milan, to London for travel. I mean, they are actually those who would like to be with the West, but the West pushed them to this corner and said that you either leave or we will help you to leave. And they were forced to travel to Turkey, Iran, Azerbaijan, to China. So this is a reaction. They were saying that, you know what, Georgia is in such geopolitical disposition that we have alternatives. We don't need to go to Russia. We have a China, India, Turkey, Iran. I mean, Georgia is a very unique place. We are not, like land closed here. If Donald Trump comes and says that, you know what, Georgian Dream? Well, I don't like your negotiations with China. I think that an nuclear port task must be suspended. I won't be surprised if they say, okay, because Georgian Dream is very prominent for its not ambiguity, but its tendency to negotiate. They can negotiate everything. I mean, like, let me remember you the law about the transparency in foreign agent. They initiated it 1 year ago. As soon as they saw that EU and the US said that, okay, we can negotiate, they give it up. They gave it. I mean, they said that, okay, we are fine. So I don't think that if Donald Trump and Robert Danigan, if she approaches Georgian Dream and said that, you know what, we are fine. We don't demand from you to be a sacrifice lamb for the Western dominance, but let's finish these talks about Chinese economic dominance in Georgia. I won't be surprised they say, okay, because to stop this process, they need just a few steps. Like, I don't know, like write down some official paper about, some land issues, and it's over. I mean, to be fair with you. So if Donald Trump offers some deal, I won't be surprised that this deal will be achieved in a few days.
Archil, you were, I believe, at the Valdai Club recently. You're one of the
Yes.
few Georgian academicians.
They are probably the only one for since its foundation. I was really happy because the Valdai Club is the leading Eurasian platform for scholars, and all American scholars were pretty happy to attend it. So it was really nice to attend the club.
We saw your article and a couple of videos from there discussing Georgian developments. What is Russia's posture towards these political developments in Georgia? I mean, we hear so much about the EU and the US and what have you, but Russia has been relatively quiet and, giving room for these developments to, process themselves.
Well, I think that, once again, I've been researching Russia for so many years. People don't remember that, like, Russian Foreign Minister Igor Ivanov was just 20 years ago attending protests in Tbilisi. People cannot even imagine this, but I remember this. It was just 2 decades ago. The Russian attitude was pretty obvious for years. The narrative was, we lost Georgia. They used to consider Georgia as extremely fanatically pro-Western. And I remember I used to tell them that do not make such statements, because Georgia was one of the most pro-communist republic too, but it was the first republic that rose against Soviet Union. So attitudes are very fluid. And they were pretty surprised when they saw that even though 80% of people, including me, voted for the Western future of Georgia, it doesn't mean that we voted for how to call it for the
an anti-Russian Georgia.
Yeah, anti-Russian Georgia, or it would make it more clear. We have never voted for reiteration of Moscow-Russian relations, Moscow-Tbilisi relations in Brussels or Washington-Tbilisi relations. This is very, I think that the audience must understand the whole concept of detachment from Moscow was to let Georgian people say what they think and not to be punished by foreign actors. And that is why we voted in 2008, if I'm not mistaken, for the European future, for the Western future. What we see now is that now Brussels and Washington are trying to build the same hierarchy. So the Brussels and some people in Brussels and Washington think that this 80% of Georgians are willingly agree to be obedient, to be in strategic obedience to the West. But this is dramatic misrepresentation. Once again, I know so many people who are for the Western integration, but every time US ambassador, EU ambassador says something and speaks on behalf of Georgian people, they get angry because they say that we have never voted for Europeans and Americans to talk on behalf of the Georgian people. And this is tremendous mistake that will lead by the end of the day, maybe not today, but in 5-10 years, to a huge amount of people having anti-Western sentiments. This is the first one. The second, what are Russians doing now? Well, of course, for Russian mainstream media, any protest in Georgia is what? Euromaidan. Americans coming to Georgia, Ukrainians coming to Georgia, and Georgians coming to Georgians, trying to shoot down, kill all everyone and to overthrow government. This is very naive, the same as in the West mainstream, I would say, stupid narrative. Every protest is a Euromaidan.
Well, it seems like ever since Ukraine started, it's become a very zero-sum game for the West, and that's the problem.
Not only because for the West, but also for the countries like Russia. I mean, in Russia, in Ukraine, in Azerbaijan, if there is in places where protest is something really out of the order, it is considered as an uprising, as some kind of new revolution.
Mm-hmm.
Because these countries like China, Azerbaijan, Russia, and I won't name other countries, for them, protest must be only pro-nationalistic or another wave of revolution. In Georgia, in European countries, the real European countries, in America, we see that there are thousands of people in front of parliament expressing their will. So that is why I always tell my colleagues in Russia, do not misrepresent this is another Euromaidan. It was one case that can be repeated somewhere, but let's finally avoid this zero-sum game. But as you mentioned well, unfortunately, for the last 2 years since war in Ukraine, and we should emphasize it everywhere, that it's all about the geopolitical fight.
Mm-hmm.
They also, like, watch Deutsche Welle, BBC, CNN, they all represent any protest, any domestic confrontation between people, whether ideological, political, as a zero-sum game. Whether you are with EU or with Russia, if they win, like in Moldova, thanks to immigration, they say that, well, God bless democracy. If they lose, like in Georgia, they try to undermine and say that this is the Russia victorious. But the last remark, if you check before the protests, the new protests now, they already started publishing articles that Georgian dream being victorious is not anti-Western. So immediately, as soon as they see that there is no continuation of what they call pro-European protest, they try to fit reality to their ideology. So I call on both sides, Russian experts and Western experts, to stop, fitting the Georgian reality to their agenda.
Well, Archil, this is a very interesting discussion so far, and I feel like I don't want to move on, but we must because of time and because we want to cover another topic, which is Abkhazia. So if you don't mind, let's do that. In November, a political unrest erupted in Abkhazia over the opposition to a Russian investment agreement allowing property purchases by Russians. The protests intensified after the arrest of 5 activists, leading to the storming of the parliament building and clashes that injured 14 people. Amid mounting pressure, President Aslan Bjania resigned on November 19, with Vice President Badra Gumba stepping in as acting president. A snap election is set for February 15, 2025 to restore stability. We've heard numerous explanations about why the current political conflict in Abkhazia emerged. One theory is that it was the result of Western interference. Others, such as yourself, have claimed that the revolt by the opposition in Abkhazia was an independent strain among the Abkhaz, reacting against potential for property ownership by Russians in Abkhazia. Can you tell us what is the source of this recent conflict? Can what happened in Abkhazia really be viewed independent of the West versus Russia conflict? I mean, can a single law on property ownership cause the downfall of a government?
Well, first of all, Abkhazia is really, really small land there. So when we speak about Abkhazia, it's imagine smaller than Monaco, and you will probably know how small is Monaco. That is why people talk a lot about Abkhazia, but they have simply no clue. Unfortunately, this is in the West, in Russia, in Georgia. So this is nothing new. You know how many times Abkhazia held some new elections before the current government managed to finish it? I mean, this is what happens in Abkhazia on a regular basis.
Well, the last ones are 2014, 2020.
Yeah, I mean, just for your audience to understand, there are places, including countries, sovereign countries, where such situation is accepted. This is a normal stuff. Secondly, this is not something new. The crisis in Abkhazia is not about foreign policy. It's not about Georgia, West Russia. It's all about local Abkhaz thinking that they fought hard to keep, and I emphasize, total dominance on those lands that belong to Abkhazia, they consider, and it is their right to hold monopoly on economic activities inside Abkhazia.
But Archil, you really cannot ignore the fact that Abkhazia, the only reason why Abkhazia is so strong is because Russia recognized it as an independent state. Only 5 UN nations, and most of them allied with Russia, including Russia, Nicaragua, Venezuela, Syria, and Nauru, have recognized Abkhazia's independence. So can Abkhazia really be considered independent? And can local leaders, no matter how independent they think they are, really exercise independence in their own land?
Without Russian support, neither Tkhanvali nor Abkhazia would have existed in general. It is by default. Like Yanukovych wouldn't have been overthrown without US support. It is obvious. No civil unrest in Syria against Bashar al-Assad and so on and so forth. So let's not be naive. But, and here's the but, even if you are supported and maintained by your metropolia, it doesn't mean that you have no ability to express your view. Abkhazia is pretty prominent with its nationalistic attitudes on the ground. And from those people who I met, and they really know inside out about Abkhazia, it's not a secret that Abkhaz people on the ground, they, yes, understand that they are dependent on Russia, but on the other hand, they actually don't like neither Russians, nor Georgians, no one. For them, their fight against Georgia in the 90s was crucial in gaining this small independence. And the fight is not about Georgianness, Europeanness, Russianness. It's about internal fight between some groups on the one hand and the Russian government who tells Abkhaz people that we are paying you money, we are giving you sovereignty, we are protecting you from Georgia, so you should give us something in return. And Abkhazians saying that, yes, we are ready. We are pro-Russians. We will go to study to Russia. We will hold like maybe Russian passports, but there are some red lines, like land. No, we are not going to sell lands. Economy, yes, if we control the main flow. And as far as I wrote, and you mentioned my comments, we already know that the new power in Abkhazia have already negotiated with Russia terms, and the Russians even stated that they are going to make some deal with Abkhaz. So what can be this deal? The deal can be very simple. They say, okay, hold 90% of the flow, 90% of the land, but give us strategic places because we need to hold the grip and to make sure that if something happens, Russia will be present there. So once again, I totally understand that some people would like to present like Georgia is totally dominated by US, like Abkhazia totally dominated by Russia. But it's not as simple as it might be. The local people, if they are united, they have their word. They can be oppressed, but definitely. They can be arrested, definitely. But in Abkhazia, contrary to South Ossetia or what we call Tskhinvali region, there is very strong Abkhazian nationalism. This is not something that can be even by Georgians, and I will remember words by probably the former foreign minister of Germany, Dieter Boden. He was the guy who created the plan of Abkhazian integration to Georgia, who said one really nice stuff. He said, if some Georgians think that the Russians will leave tomorrow and real Abkhazians, will just surrender, this is extremely naive. So when we speak about Abkhazia, we should take into consideration Russian factor, but also very strong sense of nationalism in Abkhazia. And that is why it's fight for between some Abkhazians inside for money. And you said it's not a new one. Every 2, 3, 4 years, new elections. And on the other side, Russians who are demanding price for ensuring independence, saying that we pay you, we support you, we give you money, you should give us something in exchange. So let's see what will be the deal. Very soon we will see it.
Okay. And the last topic that I want to discuss, 60% of Armenia's exports and Armenia's economy is reliant on Russia. And currently, Armenia's only transportation link with Russia is the mountainous Stepantsminda-Lars highway, which is subject to occasional closures. I believe it was closed just a few days ago, and I don't know if it's been opened because of snow. So for Armenia, the question of the Abkhazian rail link to Russia is of extreme importance. This was closed, I believe, sometime, after the 2008 war, if I'm not mistaken. From the Armenian perspective, it is of strategic interest to see the Abkhaz railway reopened. And within the context of a political rapprochement between Russia and Georgia, this seemed to be considered within the realm of possibilities. But I wanted to get your take. What is the likelihood in the foreseeable future that the Abkhaz railway will be reopened?
Well, if Georgian Dream remains in power, if Donald Trump's come to power, if Donald Trump manages to back up Georgian Dream and finish war in Ukraine, maybe something gonna happen because the issue of railways and the what we call in Georgia separatist regions is not about economy. It's not even geopolitics. It's not even about pragmatic approach. It's about emotional standpoint. Unfortunately, we should recognize that the new generation of Georgians, they do not consider all these topics as a part of international relations. They consider it as a part of the ideological, patriotic war against Russia. So if Georgian Dream will be backed out by US, something can happen, but I'm not sure what. If Georgian Dream will lose or won't be backed up, nothing gonna ever happen because Nowadays, it's not, there is less and less room for negotiations. People are pushing other peoples to make a decision, whether you are on the barricades or you are not. So you are the enemy or you are not. You are patriot or you are traitor. In this scenario, issues with the railway, and I know this is very painful for Armenia, is about this. Are geopolitical superpowers in the region ready to back up Georgian dream to break through this? We should see. But if Georgian dream loses the government, I cannot see how the new government, which will be probably radically pro-European, can ever do this. Because for them, and some of their supporters officially stated that Abkhaz people are their enemies. I cannot understand how can this in general happen. So once again, in case if something happens, some breakthrough gonna happen, Georgian dream, not Georgian dream, but balanced policy and politicians will remain in power, maybe. But if not, then I don't see, not in the near future, but even on the level of narratives, because narrative is very radical.
I agree with you because I also think that the West has absolutely no incentive to facilitate more trade relations between Armenia and Russia at a time, Hovik, when they are suggesting that we eat rice instead of wheat to get off of Russian wheat.
Well, that's fine, but what Archil is saying is like, he gave me like a lot of what ifs. And unfortunately for Armenians,
I'm sorry
unfortunately for Armenians, I will give you a derivative of your what if. So let's say the Trump supports Georgian dream. Let's say there's some kind of a agreement. There is still a big question because I believe that Turkey and Azerbaijan are driving east-west transportation communication. And is it possible that Turkey and or Azerbaijan can also have a say-so in this railway and can, let's say, lobby the Georgian government to not do this because they are interested in blockading?
No, I can tell you no.
Because there's one scenario where the Abkhaz railway will reopen, but it will be connected to the Baku-Tbilisi and Kars railroad, but not go south to Armenia.
I can say you no, and I can see you why. I mean, I have never seen. Well, look at protesters. They say that we are not democracy, we are Russian government because, and they say the Georgian dream was recognized by Armenia, Turkey, and blah, 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 non-civilized countries. They say they official statements. And they say that we are good people and good country if we are recognized by US, Germany, blah, 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 and so on. So if the US government comes out and says that I do give you green light, open the railway, I don't think that anyone on the level of, we shouldn't say narrative and ideology, will be able to come out and say that the government of Georgian dream is pro-Russian because they officially go get the green light. You should understand in Georgia, it's not about, it's about the ideology, narratives, and green light. If Donald Trump will say officially that we support opening the railway between Tbilisi and Abkhazia, I mean, I think the Georgian dream can easily come out to say, look, protesters, you are for the Western values. The West tells you, demands from you for the sake of democracy, demands to open the railway. This is that is the craziness that I analyze it. So people don't really care about the pragmatic stuff, about the economy, about the calculation, about the military. They don't really care. Some part of Georgia, they don't really care. They care what U.S. ambassador says. Even if she or he said that it's time to turn to Buddhism, they will follow it. Because U.S. ambassador
This is crazy.
Yeah, I mean, this is craziness. I mean, I thought that people believed in such fertile in the early 2000s. I can understand them because I also believe it. But when in 2024, you really think that US ambassador says that sun is blue, it must be blue, and we really have such people. If these sent people, Holy Spirit from US, said that it's time to open the railway, there will be no more debate. The government can come out and say that if you oppose this, you are agents of Russia. Can you imagine what a perfect tool in head of the government to finally say that they are opposing the Western will, the will of the Holy United States of America? They will do it like this snap of the finger, but I really, really question that Donald Trump will do this, even with his determination to finalize the war in Ukraine. Once again, let's be objective. Donald Trump will support conservative government in Georgia, but he will demand probably to stop Georgian-Chinese economic relations in exchange. And Georgian Dream will do this because China is far away. China is not something that Georgian people is oriented toward. But Abkhazia, I don't think even that Donald Trump even knows where it is. I don't think that he really actually cares. I don't really think that even EU members know where they are, and they really care.
Well, you would be surprised, Archil, because obviously Donald Trump knows about Artsakh, Nagorno-Karabakh, so maybe he also knows about Abkhazia.
Of course. I mean, I had a professor from Oxford University, and he always used to say that when you write a huge paper, you need always to write executive summary, 150 words. That is what politicians usually read. So once again, for your audience, if someone thinks that Ursula von der Leyen, I don't know, like Donald Trump really knows where it's Artsakh, Abkhazia, even Georgia, even Armenia, you are pretty naive. They know where is Russia, they know where is China, where is India, Hong Kong, but definitely not Abkhazia and Artsakh.
All right, we're going to leave it there today. Thank you very much, Archil, for your insight on developments in Georgia.
Thank you.
Thank you, Archil.
That's our show today. This episode was recorded on November 30th, 2024. We've been talking with Dr. Archil Sikharulidze, who is a founder of the Tbilisi-based research institute Sikha Foundation in the Republic of Georgia. He holds degrees in international relations and focuses on Russian and Islamic studies, as well as political processes and international relations in Ukraine, the South Caucasus, and Kazakhstan. He writes extensively for various local and international platforms. For more information on everyone in this show, please go to our show notes at podcasts.groong.org/episode number. We'll talk to you soon.